January 19th, 2018. La Paz. Police and rescue teams have converged on a stretch of the Orcoira River. After 19 days of a search operation under the scrutiny of all Bolivia, forensic investigators begin pulling objects from the water. These are not scattered clues on the shoreline. This is heavy cargo, deliberately hidden at the bottom. Rescuers haul up jute sacks. The contents are tightly packed, and the shape leaves no doubt. Inside are human remains. Those of a man and a woman. Their time submerged in water inside sealed packaging created a harsh environment that accelerated irreversible tissue decay. Visual identification is nearly impossible, and even estimating the time of death proves extremely difficult. Moisture has washed away many surface traces, turning the bodies into a serious forensic puzzle. On-scene examination reveals a chilling common detail. Both victims suffered severe traumatic brain injuries. The damage indicates they were struck with a blunt object wielding tremendous force. This was not an accidental fall or drowning. The people in the sacks were killed intentionally and in a brutal crime, then dumped into the river like construction debris. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, I just want to ask you to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment below. I put a lot of effort into bringing you real true crime cases from around the world. Only authentic stories here. Your support really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate every interaction. Carla and Jesus Canisare were both born in 1992. Their life paths mirrored each other almost from the start. In 2003, both families suffered the same kind of loss. Carla and Jesus lost their fathers. That loss prompted Carla's mother to relocate. She moved with her 5 younger family members from Santa Cruz de la Sierra to La Paz in hopes of starting over. As the eldest, Carla stepped up as head of the household. She watched over her younger brothers and sisters, kept track of their school performance and curfews. Carla enrolled in an accounting program and completed it through external certification so she could start working sooner and help support her mother financially. In the Canisare household, the situation was strikingly similar. Jesus was raised alongside 3 older sisters, but as the only male in the home, he became the primary support for his seamstress mother. He didn't just help maintain order. He assisted with her work, taking on sewing orders when needed. At family weddings, he escorted his sisters down the aisle, standing in for the father they'd lost. At the time he disappeared, Jesus was finishing up his economics degree and putting the final touches on his thesis. He was just 1 step away from graduation. Their paths first crossed in 2008 at college. Jesus was a year ahead of Carla. They met at a college party, introduced by Carla's sister. Their relationship grew slowly, from walks home together to a strong friendship, then blossoming into a romance. Carla kept things under wraps for a long time, only introducing Jesus as her boyfriend during graduation night. They were what most would call a stay-at-home couple. Not big on wild parties, Carla and Jesus preferred quiet travels and time with family. They had a clear plan. As soon as Jesus completed his thesis defense, they'd get married and start their life together in their own place. The timeline for January 1st, 2018, is pieced together through digital breadcrumbs. Carla and Jesus hadn't planned on a long night out. They only ended up going to the Planta Baja Club after some heavy persuasion from friends tied to the band performing there on New Year's Eve. At around 4 a.m., Carla posted a photo on Facebook. The couple looked happy, clearly enjoying the celebration. About an hour later, around 5 a.m., their activity shifted to private chats. They messaged family members, saying they planned to leave the club by 6 o'clock and be home around 7 o'clock a.m. During that same time, Jesus sent a series of messages to his sisters and to Carla's brother-in-law. But these weren't your typical New Year's greetings. He wrote that he loved them and promised to take care of Carla's family. For those receiving these messages, the wording felt off, like a farewell. Still, there was no real reason to panic yet. After 5 a.m., all communication stopped. Their families began calling and texting throughout the morning. The phones rang, still turned on, but no one answered. Tensions rose by midday. It was Carla's nephew's birthday, and the couple was expected at a family lunch. Missing that was highly unusual. They never skipped out on family events. When Jesus' mother showed up at Carla's home and found no sign of her son, it became clear something was very wrong. With no answers and no signs of the couple, the families turned to law enforcement. The focus of both the investigation and the public quickly zeroed in on the Planta Baja nightclub, the last place the couple had been seen. But the early days of the investigation became a battle of nerves. The club's owners refused to cooperate. They wouldn't hand over security footage or allow family members inside, insisting on an official court order. That forced the families to stage protests outside the entrance, but the doors stayed shut. The scene wasn't opened until January 4th. Once inside, investigators uncovered several red flags typical of an underground operation. The club had no valid license to operate, and while security cameras were installed, they weren't recording. They were just for show. That left a dangerous information gap during the most critical window. To make things worse, the club owner's statements quickly became inconsistent. At first, he told police he personally walked Carla and Jesus out of the club. But under pressure, he changed his story, now saying it was a security guard who saw them out. That lie was the final straw for investigators, and it pushed them to fear the worst. Tensions skyrocketed when, in the middle of the search, an anonymous call came in. The voice on the line claimed that Carla and Jesus had been taken out right inside the club, and that their bodies were secretly buried beneath the floor. Police had no choice but to act. Forensics teams practically dismantled the club, piece by piece. Hopes briefly surged when blood samples were found on the floor. News outlets jumped on the theory that it might belong to the missing couple. But DNA tests quickly killed that lead. The blood wasn't Carla's, and it wasn't Jesus's. The theory that they were harmed and hidden inside the club collapsed. Investigators had lost precious time chasing a false lead, while the real criminals were gaining ground. With the club theory dead, the investigation pivoted to technology. Police obtained phone records for both victims. It turned out their phones had remained active even after the supposed disappearance, and those signals could be tracked. What detectives uncovered next felt like a cold-blooded liquidation of someone else's life. The first digital trail came from Jesus' phone. His SIM card had been activated in a device currently in possession of a woman named Jocelyn Quisbert. During questioning, she tried to dodge responsibility, claiming the phone wasn't actually hers. She said she had just borrowed it. Digging deeper, police uncovered links to a cab driver and his brother. They confessed to buying the phone off someone on the street. No questions asked. It had been passed around for pocket change. Carla's phone led to an even more tangled path. Her SIM card turned up in the hands of two sisters, Olga and Graciela Cuti. Unlike Jocelyn, the sisters were more cooperative. They pointed police to a man named Johnny Signani, who'd sold them the phone. His arrest confirmed what investigators had started to suspect. Personal belongings of the missing couple had quickly entered the black market electronics scene. The arrests of Signani, the Cuti sisters, and others in the chain revealed a grim truth. This wasn't a disappearance. This was something far more deliberate. The phones had been taken after the couple left the club, and the devices were dumped or resold to destroy the digital connection between the victims and the perpetrators. The looters who snapped up the stolen tech had unknowingly helped cover the criminals' tracks. What stood out most in this part of the story was the speed with which evidence was wiped out. While Carla and Jesus' families were still calling hospitals and clinging to hope, their phones were already being bartered at street stalls. Everyone in the chain, from the cabbie to Johnny Signani, had to know these items weren't legit, but no one asked where they came from. That silence gave the criminals a perfect smokescreen. Then, on January 17th, detectives made a critical breakthrough. A deep analysis of Jesus' phone's geolocation history led the task force to the name Israel Leon, a man who had also been at the club that night. Through him, police uncovered a wider group: Israel's brother and sister, Elliot and Michaela, along with their partners, Renzo and Stephanie. But the real win? The statements from those taken into custody finally helped fill in the exact gap in the timeline, the hours that had previously seemed to vanish without explanation. It turned out there was a critical gap between the last message sent around 5 a.m. and the couple's actual departure from the club. Several hours had passed. According to case files, Carla and Jesus' friends, as well as the band they'd come to see, had all left fairly early. But Carla and Jesus didn't leave with them. Instead, they stayed behind and ended up mingling with a new group, the Leon brothers, whom they had just met at the bar. That fatal party dragged on until the club closed its doors. The group kept drinking together until around 9 o'clock in the morning. At that point, in broad daylight, they all stepped outside. A nearby business's security camera captured this final scene. Carla, Jesus, and 3 men, Israel, Elliot, and Renzo, are seen talking with a taxi driver on the sidewalk. With them were the women from the group, Michaela and Stephanie. Eventually, the entire group, including both victims and their soon-to-be attackers, split up into separate cars, planning to keep the celebration going somewhere else. This time window, from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., completely reframes the nature of the crime. Carla and Jesus were no longer with people they knew and trusted. They'd spent nearly 4 hours with total strangers. Fueled by alcohol and a false sense of safety built during those hours of partying, they willingly climbed into a cramped car with individuals who would soon become their executioners. Inside the taxi, there were 5 passengers. Jesus Canisare, apparently still in a festive mood, didn't want the night to end. According to witness statements, he was the one who asked the fatal question: "Where can we keep this going?" Israel Leon quickly stepped in and offered his house as a safe place for an after-party, but the group didn't head there immediately. Along the way, they asked the driver to stop so they could pick up more alcohol, a shared decision that highlighted just how intoxicated everyone in the car was. When they finally arrived at Israel's home, Stephanie and Michaela were already there, waiting. The toll of the sleepless night and heavy drinking began to show. Carla Bello, completely exhausted, fell asleep almost as soon as she walked through the door. The host, Israel, also passed out in another room. That left 4 people awake in the kitchen: Jesus, Elliot, Renzo, and Stephanie. They kept drinking, but the tension inside the small space grew with every passing minute. Around 11 a.m., things took a sharp turn. The argument that broke out started over something almost laughable. Elliot began aggressively criticizing Jesus for allegedly pouring drinks the wrong way. Verbal jabs turned into mutual accusations. As Jesus began sobering up, he noticed something was off. Both his and Carla's phones were missing. He confronted the group, demanding their belongings back. Desperate and agitated, he tried to check Elliot's pockets himself. That moment of physical contact triggered everything. Elliot responded with a punch, and that single blow set off a chain reaction of aggression that could no longer be stopped. The fight escalated into a brutal, one-sided assault almost instantly. The noise of the beating woke Israel, but instead of stopping the violence, he joined his brother Elliot and began attacking Jesus. The third man, Renzo, also got involved. The two women, Michaela and Stephanie, were present at the beginning of the attack, but according to court records, chose not to intervene. At some point, they reportedly left the house saying they were going to the store, abandoning the victims with the aggressors. The men then separated the couple. Jesus, already severely beaten, was dragged into another room, out of the way. With no one left to witness what came next, the three men, the Leon brothers and Renzo, assaulted Carla, who was asleep and heavily intoxicated. She was in no condition to defend herself. Afterward, they moved her to the room where Jesus lay unconscious, and the assault continued. The tragic climax came when Jesus, despite his injuries, regained consciousness. Seeing what was happening to Carla, he tried to intervene. That act of defiance cost him his life. One of the attackers grabbed a heavy metal object, a pipe, and struck Jesus in the head. The blow was fatal. He died almost instantly from the trauma. With the only person capable of protecting Carla now gone, the attackers used the same weapon to take her life too. The violence ended with a terrifying silence settling over the house. What followed was nothing short of chilling. After committing the double crime, the Leon family didn't flee. They went out for lunch, as if nothing had happened. While they were eating and casually discussing what to do next, Carla and Jesus' bodies were still lying in a locked room. The victims remained in that house for nearly 2 full days. Life continued in the adjacent rooms, while just a wall away, the irreversible process of decomposition had already begun. The criminals waited for street activity to quiet down before attempting to get rid of the evidence. That decision was made on the night of January 3rd. Under cover of darkness, the men wrapped the bodies in coarse jute sacks. The choice was practical. The thick fabric hid the contents and was easier to carry. They didn't use a vehicle. Instead, they transported the remains on foot to the closest disposal point, the Ocoira River. There, they lowered the bodies into the water, counting on the current and mud to erase the evidence for good. By then, the entire country was searching for the missing couple. Their faces were all over the news. But no one had any idea that what they were really looking for was already lying at the bottom of a river. What shocks me most is the 2-day delay. This wasn't a panicked attempt to cover up a crime in the heat of the moment. This was cold, calculated coexistence with the aftermath of their own aggression. They ate and slept under the same roof as the people they had just taken out, a chilling display of complete emotional detachment. By the time the bodies were recovered, investigators had already closed in on the main suspects. But one critical piece was still missing. Elliot Leon, whom the other suspects had described as the ringleader and the most aggressive during the attack, had fled. While police were questioning his relatives, Elliot managed to cross the national border, trying to disappear in a neighboring country. Law enforcement shifted focus to an international manhunt. Intelligence pointed to Elliot being in Brazil, in the massive city of São Paulo. He was aided by a partner, who was later investigated for helping him evade arrest. The search came to an end on January 26, 2018. Brazilian authorities apprehended the suspect and extradited him to Bolivia, where investigators were already waiting. During questioning, Elliot used a cold and calculated defense strategy, the same one his brother had tried before. Both admitted to the group assault and acts of aggression, but adamantly denied delivering the fatal blows with the metal pipe. Elliot claimed Israel had been the one responsible. Israel, in turn, gave the exact opposite statement, saying Elliot was the one who used the weapon. The brothers were trying to outmaneuver investigators, knowing full well that whoever delivered the pipe strike would legally carry the full weight of the charge. But for prosecutors, that detail didn't change the overall picture. The entire event was charged as a joint criminal act, a group crime, and no single role was isolated. This was a classic case of the prisoner's dilemma, taken to the extreme. The Leon brothers were willing to confess to the collective crime, but were terrified to own up to that one decisive moment with the pipe, as if that act, and not the hours of abuse leading up to it, was the only thing that would make them criminals in the eyes of the law. When the bodies were transferred to the morgue, forensic examiners encountered serious contradictions that briefly derailed the investigation. The autopsies confirmed the cause of death. Both victims had died from severe traumatic brain injuries with significant internal bleeding. The examination also documented multiple signs of physical trauma inflicted on Carla while she was still alive. But the real controversy came with the initial estimation of the time of death. Early forensic reports listed different dates. Jesus was said to have died on January 4th, while Carla was recorded as surviving until January 11th. These dates gave rise to a horrifying theory that the victims had been held captive for more than a week, subjected to abuse while police were still searching for them. For the families, this information was devastating. It sparked a wave of unbearable grief, fueled by the false hope that they might have been saved. Eventually, that theory was fully debunked and ruled out. Forensic experts explained that the discrepancy came from the unique conditions in which the bodies had been stored. Being submerged in water, sealed inside thick jute sacks, had created a microenvironment that distorted the natural decomposition timeline. Once investigators cross-referenced autopsy data with the suspect's confessions, they were able to confirm the truth. Death occurred in the early hours of January 1st, just hours after the abduction. There was no prolonged captivity. The trial in the case of Carla Bellot and Jesus Canesare stretched on for over 20 months, becoming a true test of endurance for the families left behind. Sitting in the courtroom were 5 main defendants: brothers Elliot and Israel Leon, their sister Michaela, Renzo Caceres, and Stephanie. The prosecution laid out a comprehensive body of evidence proving their involvement in the brutal acts. The court handed down the harshest possible verdict. All 5 were found guilty on multiple charges, including femicide, homicide, aggravated assault, and complicity in the crime. Each was sentenced to 30 years in prison with no chance of parole, the maximum penalty under Bolivian law. Justice also caught up with those who played supporting roles in the tragedy. Elliot's girlfriend, who helped him flee to Brazil and evade authorities, along with the individuals who trafficked the stolen phones, were each sentenced to 2 years for aiding a fugitive and dealing in stolen property. But the final chapter of this story wasn't written by a judge. It was written by the parents. During a farewell mass, the families held a symbolic wedding ceremony for Carla and Jesus. The young couple, who had dreamed of getting married after college, were declared husband and wife posthumously. For their loved ones, it was a way to restore justice on a spiritual level. The perpetrators may have stolen their lives, but they couldn't destroy their bond. That posthumous wedding stands out as an extraordinary act of resistance in the face of evil. The families refused to let the ending be defined by what happened in that dark room. Instead, they rewrote it, giving Carla and Jesus the future they had envisioned, even if only as part of a final solemn farewell.